Not on actual vetted job sites like Indeed, but something stupid like Craigslist, or Facebook, or you magically run across a paper flyer you never noticed before that happens to be sitting eye level with you while you sip on a non-fat soy latte you just purchased with the remaining $5 in your checking account. Security guard needed. Start tonight. $40 an hour, no experience needed. If there aren't any red flags in that quoted line right there, you need to go get your head checked, or lay off the soy lattes. No security firm pays 40 bones an hour for a rando off the street with no experience, and I'd be willing to bet my ridiculous government paycheck on it. This also goes for amusement parks, malls, universities, subway systems, the works. See, I've investigated so many of these facilities over the last 10 years that it feels like the general population should have gotten a hold of things by now. If they had, my agency could go public and you could call us on the phone like a normal person and we'd come out and take care of it, instead of us stumbling on this crap on Reddit after bodies have started piling up. No, you have to take the hard way. Fine. Here are a list of rules to follow for you to not get caught up in crap like this. This isn't all-inclusive, either, so no one should be all up in my DMs going but Echo, what about if we're in the middle of the wilderness in West Virginia and we are hearing things? Well, first off, I hope you brought friends. That way, whatever is trying to hunt and kill you will hopefully pick off your bros one by one while you try to find a way out. There is something you people need to realize real fucking quick, a forest in the United States isn't any less ancient than the forests you find in Europe or Asia. Things have been out there since before the Native Americans were throwing spears at it, and it will be here after we are gone. Anyways, onto the rules. Rules for surviving jobs. 1. If a job posting seems too good to be true, then it probably is. 2. If you can't easily do a web search of the company, it's probably a shell. 3. If it advertises high pay for low skill, it isn't worth it. 4. You aren't equipped to fight whatever you are going to find. 5. The people who hired you know you are stupid, and they will not help you. 6. If you find yourself in this situation, follow the rules to the letter. 7. If you live and make it out, DM me, and never go back there. Rules for surviving the wilderness. 1. Don't go into the wilderness. 2. If you go into the wilderness, take someone with you, preferably multiple people. 3. Don't go more than 2 miles from a main road. Most roads used to be native footpaths, who figured out the best way to travel through that area. 4. Research the lore. Most of it is grounded in some measure of truth. 5. Don't go during hot times, Halloween, solstice, harvest, etc. 6. If a tree starts bleeding, leave the area. Once safe, mark the coordinates and DM me. 7. Most state/national parks are there as a safeguard against a cryptid we can't just dispose of. Follow the rules of the park. 8. If it feels like a gate to hell, it probably is. Don't go through it. I'll add to these later, but those are the basics. Your gut instinct is something that modern society has been trying to dull for a while. That animalistic urgency isn't something to be ignored. If your body and mind are telling you something is whack, then get out of there. I'm really tired of going to a site just to see the remains of humans sprawled everywhere after they passed 10 blood totems, a marsh where animals drown for eternity, demonic-looking gates and signs that pretty much say you're gonna die a horrible death if you keep going, fam. Common sense is your friend. Now that my little tidbit has been said, I have an investigation to get to. We always have a hidden camera with us, so when I get back, I'll transcribe it here. Yes, my boss is fine with this, he is tired of it too. Written transcription follows. Agent, redacted, Echo, and Agent, redacted, shout. Arrival on site is 1630, 22nd of January 20XX, redacted, South Dakota. Echo? Shout? Where did this come from? My partner queried. Just go along with it, you goober, think of it as a training video for morons. Brain is cool with it. I spat back. Contrasting my short, platinum hair and equally short stature, Shout was an even 6 feet, with well-combed red hair. He wasn't built like a brick shithouse, as in our profession, and paid more to be able to run than anything else. Hey, most times you can't outmuscle cryptids, so you have to outthink and outsmart. Brain? His voice rose in pitch as he sounded the word out. Brain was my codename for the boss, a fact which he had just now become privy to. You should be Shout. Honestly, you do that a lot. Ignoring how true his words were, as I tend to get overly excited in certain situations, I put the truck into gear and drove into the mostly empty parking lot of the museum. I hate museums. People want to collect old shit, and are surprised when it comes with, sometimes deadly, strings attached. We looked up at the 2-story building in front of us. It was an old house, one of those Victorian types with a creepy atmosphere, and some local thought it'd be a cool museum renovation. The architecture was pretty neat actually. Atop the entrance sat a hand-painted sign that spoke the name of the museum, mostly displaying things like antebellum antiquities and strange objects from around the state. A job posting had been popping up on Facebook for a while. It would be filled, then about a week later it would be up again. So far, 3 security guards had been reported missing or in an accident of some kind, so we caught wind and decided to investigate. The town was mildly populated, a couple of thousand people at most, and it was cold as balls outside. To better blend in with the locals, Shout and I moved into a piece of shit apartment in town and bought a raspy old Dodge truck to showcase how poor we were. Thankfully, they were happy to sign on 2 new security guards for the night shift, at a ridiculous rate of $43.50 an hour. Remember my rules from earlier? Classic. We pulled into the parking spot and shut the truck off. From the back of the extended cab, Shout pulled a small case up and into his lap, thumbed the latches and flipped it open. A small laptop sat in the case. Attached via USB was the redacted device, an instrument for measuring levels of redacted. The readout was going ballistic, indicating that cryptid shit was definitely happening. He shut the laptop and closed the case just as we had a visitor. An old lady somewhere between 95 and 110 years old walked out to greet us, dirty gray and white hair flapping in the freezing wind. She maybe topped 5 feet in height, and her face was beaten and weathered, with scars dotting her mottled flesh. "You two were supposed to be here 30 minutes ago. Get inside," she spat, then turned to walk inside without waiting, muttering something like "fucking kids having no respect" or some other boomer crap like that. "Oh, she's a pleasant one," Shout mused as he stepped out. I just followed him and we went inside together. The interior was hot. Like, ridiculously hot, that type of heat when you take a trip down south in the summer and it's 120% humidity and makes you feel sticky. The entryway looked pretty normal. Across the threshold one could see a decent part of the museum just from there. Cabinets were arranged in a pattern that formed a route, where you start at one end and end up in a gift shop full of cheaply made, overpriced crap. We bypassed the starting line and went straight to the gift shop, where the old bag was pouring coffee into cups that looked like they hadn't seen a sink or dishwasher ever. "Hopefully you'll last longer than the others." Now that the wind wasn't covering it, her voice was painful to hear, a rasp deeper than Shout's voice ever could be with the unmistakable sound of smoke damage mixed in. She reeked of cigarettes and alcohol. "What happened to the others?" Shout asked, leaning on the glass case atop the old woman's desk. She promptly shoved his arm off of it. "This place is filled with things. Things that do things to people, make them do things. Things that people don't normally do. Can you handle it?" "Fucking what?" My obvious shock was noted by the woman. "You don't believe me, you little tramp? Stay a night here, see how you do. If you live, I'll double your pay." "The fuck did you just say to me, you old bitch?" My face grew hot, my temper flared and I started over. Shout grabbed me and held me back while the old woman sat there, laughing one of those sandpaper on metal laughs only lifelong smokers could do. "You got fire? Good, you'll need it. Museum closes at 5 p.m. Make sure you lock up, and read the rule book. I'm going home." "Fine, get the fuck out then," I spat, eager to be done with her. She laughed some more and grabbed her things. She set a binder on top of the desk without a label on it and patted it, staring right into Shout's eyes. "You could come with me, kiddo, we'll take a dip in my hot tub together." The amount of sultry she tried to put into her voice was painful to hear. Well, I can't, gotta, get to the job and stuff, alright? Ha. The woman laughed again and left straight away. I broke out into fits of uncontrolled laughter while Shout began dry heaving into the half-full trash can to the side of the desk. He was popular with ladies, especially the older ones. Unlucky for them, he was gay as can be, so no one had a chance. Alright, let's get to these rules. Hope this isn't complicated, I really don't want to deal with this crap tonight. Shout busied himself with looking over pictures on the desk. "Huh. Check this out." I peeked over. A row of photos sat against the back wall. They went from old to new, and each one of them had multiple people in it. One thing stuck out, there was one person who was in all the pictures. Young, not terribly pretty but enough to attract attention. "A life stealer?" he asked. "Probably. Explains why the guards went missing and why she needs someone pretty quick." "Okay, you should know the drill by now, dude. How much time we have?" 15 minutes, give or take." He responded as I opened the manual, checking inside for a slip of paper. Here we go. Usually, jobs like this don't publish their own rules, because that would indicate knowledge of the deadly paranormal happenings. Usually they jot him down on notebook paper and cram it somewhere obvious so they don't lose too many too soon. Rules for the redacted museum. Failure to follow these rules may result in injury or death. 1. Your shift starts exactly at 5 p.m. Be in the museum before then. If you drive up to the museum after this time, turn around and go home. Do not be outside on the museum grounds after this time. 2. 5 p.m. to 5:30, use this time to lock up. Every door, every window must be closed and locked securely. Do not go into the attic except during the times outlined in these rules. 3. 5:30 to 5:31, the attic house is an old wedding dress. Once 5:30 hits, the door to the case will open and will remain open for 1 minute. Before it closes, you must walk up the stairs and knock on the door. The door to the attic will open for you. Walk inside, face the dress and curtsy. Say, "Good evening ma'am, we will take care of you tonight." Close the door for the dress. If you reach the attic and the door to the case is closed, you can try to run if you want. 4. After this, walk around the museum from the start of the exhibits to the end. Read everything, as if you were a tourist. The exhibits like when they are paid attention. 5. During your tour, you may encounter screams and crying. You may see things in your peripheral. Do not attempt to look for the source of the screams, or at anything in your peripheral vision. 6. The exhibits may change, displaying truly frightening scenes that may involve family members. Do not enter the exhibits, unless you want to become part of it. 7. Near the end of the tour before you exit to the gift shop, you must turn and bow, and say thank you for the lovely time. It doesn't matter what you see, you must still thank the exhibits. 8. When you exit to the gift shop, you will see a grotesque young man sitting at the desk. Buy something, it doesn't matter what it is, and accept the receipt. Your purchase will be refunded to you in the morning. Do not look at the receipt. 9. After the tour, you must complete a walkthrough of the museum every hour. You may hear knocking on the door or windows. Do not open or look out of them. 10. Do not answer the phone. Well, that's pretty mundane. I mused, looking over to Shout. He checked his watch and looked back up. Time to say hey to the dress. Got the stuff? I patted a small bag that I passed off as a purse, and we walked upstairs to the attic. I knocked on the door and we waited for half a second when it opened, showing a lovely white wedding dress in an open case. It was very old, maybe turn of the 19th century, frilly and tiny. This was most likely the course of the power the lady had, used in tandem with some kind of old magic or curse to steal the life force of others and prolong her life. We followed the rule and made a curtsy, telling the dress we would take care of it tonight. Shout closed the case. Downstairs, we began our tour of the museum like a tourist would. The exhibits actually weren't too numerous, but the rules hadn't been lying when it said they might show us some fucked up shit. Bloodbaths, cannibalism, bloody debauchery, it ran the gamut. Shout was still relatively new to the whole thing, so I pulled an air sickness bag from my purse and handed it to him right before he chucked his guts up. I've seen plenty like this, kinda jaded now, which is the sad part. We continued through the museum at a leisurely pace, stopping to look at each grotesque scene shown to us. At the end, we turned and thanked the exhibits for a good time. The creatures that had been at our peripheral were suddenly in front of us. Watching, growling with mouths in places they shouldn't be, making sounds that shouldn't be heard by mortals. Shout was pale, I went tense. Eldritch abominations were the worst to me, and the museum was full of them. I couldn't wait to be free of this place. They were there, waiting for us to mess up. One infraction would be our demise. We turned and exited the gift shop, picked out 2 candies and paid for them individually, keeping the receipts. The lights dimmed and the grotesque kid disappeared. Hey, Echo, what causes this stuff to appear here? Shout spoke while I was busy rummaging through books to find the secret diaries these people inevitably kept. I was halfway inside of a deep bookshelf when he asked. Thin think of the world as as a flat plane. Flat Earth theory, except interdimensional instead of real space. Humans can't really perceive it too much since our telepathic ability is almost nil, but that is also what kinda protects us. Creatures from different planes feed on energy created from mental stimulation, like psychic food, and a powerful enough sources like blood in the water. Emotions serve as a conduit, that's why a lot of possessed objects were the possession of someone whose emotion was so strong it created a beacon for something. Demons are the most common, because they can possess smaller objects easier, kinda like that dress. They can feed and regulate themselves to do what they want to do. Eldritch creatures are in turn drawn by a demon, who has a bigger presence on the psychic plane than any human ever could. I tossed more books off the shelf. So the things we saw in the museum weren't demons? I thought all of these were. Didn't you pay attention in redacted course? Eldritch. Not really understandable by us, but there are some explanations. Eldritch creatures can only affect our world during times when the barrier is weaker, such as nighttime, or during certain psychic extraplanar phases. Phases? Like, boss fight phases? He arched a brow, taking the diaries I handed him and placing them on the desk. No, you doof. Kinda like phases of the moon, our world's psychic manifestation goes through phases as well. These correspond to certain times of the year, such as Halloween, Midsummer, etc. That's why you hear of most eldritch activity taking place more at certain times of the year. Demons don't have to worry as much about the barrier, but they still have limitations. Houses like this are dangerous because eventually so many beings will congregate that it'll weaken the barrier enough for them to get in. Good thing we are here. I'd rather sit in a hot tub with the old bat than have to deal with that kind of infestation. Yeah, me too. I replied. The phone began ringing, startling me and making me slam my head against the shelf. I shimmied free of the bookcase and rubbed my head. Neither Shout nor I attempted to answer the phone. Rule 10. I'm going to start reading these. It's time for a museum walk. You take the honors and I'll switch next time. See you in a few, Echo. Shout, be careful. Symptoms are classic, but treat everything like it's your first time. He nodded and walked off, leaving me to manually transcribe certain passages into my notebook. Taking pictures would be easier, but you run the risk of transferring the possession if you photocopy the whole book. Shout returned a while later, and we switched off like this for the most of the night. All in all, it was relatively pain-free, not a bad one to introduce Shout to a rule-based anomalous facility. 7 a.m. came quickly after, and the old bat seemed astonished that we were still alive. No issues? She quirked a brow. Nah, none at all. I responded. See you back tonight? Shout answered. Yes ma'am, we will. Rules were simple, museum wasn't too bad. We'll see you tonight. We walked out, got in the truck and left. Well, we left, but parked around the corner to where we could still scope the place with binoculars. Leaving the truck after we saw the woman peer out the door and look around, we quietly made our way back up to the museum entrance and looked in. The woman was frantic, going through the diaries I had left on the desk for her to find. She frantically made her way upstairs as fast as her stubby old legs would allow. Shout made quick work of picking the lock and we walked after her. From my jacket pocket I pulled free a Sig Sauer 9mm, already loaded and safety off. We approached the attic door just as the woman opened the case and gently took the dress out of it, cradling it like a child. Oh my sweet thing, I'm so glad they didn't hurt you. They know, they saw everything. I don't know how but, no they will be back, and then we'll take care of us? I interrupted her. I raised my pistol as she turned around. Her mouth opened to speak and I put a bullet in her brain, spraying gray matter, bone fragments, skin and hair over the back wall. She crumpled to the floor and Shout began dousing lighter fluid on the dress and floor, then lit it all with a breeze-proof lighter. Matches could be blown out easily. As the dress caught on fire, unearthly screams filled the house. Shout and I bolted, running down the stairs and shouldering our way out of the door and into the morning light outside. He caught his breath as I stood, taking his lighter and lighting a cigarette, a habit picked up years ago after my first job. We walked back to the truck and got in. Agent, redacted, Echo, and Agent, redacted, Shout, Stage 1 complete. Final sweep of site with, redacted, device will commence after site has been cleared by first responders. Incendiary operations will resume if first responding services are r/nosleep. Posted by u/Thetona City in China. If you ever get an invitation to attend Mr. Wyatt childhood, due to our fathers being best friends from college, Wyatt and I were tight, and we were pretty much always at odds with Schmidt, but we couldn't give up the perks of Schmidt's cool treehouse enough to let Schmidt's shitty personality get to us. But I did win. I have the most money, and the game's name is Monopoly. So, I won. Schmidt argued. Just let him think he won. I don't want to hear him whine for the next half an hour. Artie whispered as Schmidt packed up the board. Introverted Arthur Lee and his extroverted older sister, Jenny Lee, moved into town a few months prior, and Schmidt immediately took it upon himself to become friends with them. It wasn't because he particularly liked Arthur, but because he had a huge crush on Jenny the moment he laid his beady little eyes on her. "Speaking of, where's Jenny?" Schmidt asked coolly. We knew his attitude was a bluff. He had the biggest crush on Jenny out of all of us. "She can't leave her room until she finishes her homework. She'll probably be here in a few minutes." Artie shrugged. "Apparently 8th graders have more homework than we do. Why, are you finally gonna tell her you like her?" Wyatt teased, making kissing sounds. Schmidt and Jenny, sitting in a tree, KISS. "Shut up. I don't even like her, you dickhead." Schmidt kicked Wyatt's leg, and Wyatt grabbed his foot in retaliation. Artie and I watched as they started tussling, and I leaned back on my hands. "This is not the way I wanted to spend summer vacation." I sighed. My parents had to cancel a vacation to Disney because my grandmother had fallen sick and my mom had to take care of her. "Tell me about it. If Schmidt makes us play even one more round of Monopoly, I'm going to kill myself." Artie rolled his eyes. "Why do we have to hang out with him again?" "'Cause he has the treehouse." "I heard that," Schmidt exclaimed, fingers shoved up Wyatt's nose. Wyatt himself was punching Schmidt's thighs. "You guys are such assholes, I knew you. Are you guys fighting up there again?" As soon as we heard Jenny's voice, all fighting seemed to cease at once. We heard her climbing up the wooden ladder, and we straightened up at the same time. "The treehouse is gonna break if you keep tussling in here like that." Jenny's head popped up into the entryway. She hoisted herself up into the small treehouse with a big smile. By middle school standards, Jenny was one of the prettiest girls at school, and she was immensely popular. At the time, I couldn't fathom why she chose to hang out with us idiots instead of the cooler kids at school. Hey, Jenny." Schmidt leaned back on one arm, the other one resting on his knee, trying to look as macho as possible. It wasn't working. "How are ya?" "Just peachy. Didn't finish my homework in the end, but Mom doesn't have to know that." She shot a look at Artie as she put down her backpack. "Anyway, guys, look what I found in the mailbox before I came." We all gathered in a circle around Jenny as she pulled a folded piece of paper out of her back pocket. I thought it was a letter from my friend from back home, but it was actually a flyer for the circus. She unfolded the flyer, revealing a bright red and white striped circus tent with elephants, clowns, and a tall ringmaster with undecipherable features surrounding the tent. In big, dramatic letters, the flyer read Mr. Wax's Traveling Circus. "Circus?" Wyatt wrinkled his nose. "We've never had a circus in town before." "I've been to plenty of circuses," Schmidt crossed his arms. "My dad took me 100 times when I was little. And I always had front row seats and got to meet the ringmaster. I even pet the lions before." "No one cares, Schmidt," I muttered. "I've never been to a circus. I was sick when my parents took Artie to see the Ringling Brothers." Jenny sighed. "I really want to go. It's not my fault you got sick." Artie sighed, exasperated. "Where is this circus anyway?" It's Jenny looked down at the flyer. "I'm not really sure. It doesn't really say anywhere on it." "Wait," Wyatt grabbed the flyer from Jenny and pointed to the back. It was a little map of the town, focusing on Jenny and Artie's home with a red dotted line trailing beyond their backyard. It looked as if it was drawn with a crayon. "That X must be where it is." I glanced at the crude map, an unsettling feeling resting in my stomach. Weird. It was like the directions were specifically tailored for Jenny and Artie, whose house was at the end of a cul-de-sac. Their backyard faced a thick grove of woods separated by their fence. The woods eventually tapered off into an enormous lake that bordered the town. The kids of the town were told not to go in there, but we were kids. We went into the woods all the time. But even we never went that far into the woods. "That's so convenient, we should go. When else will a circus come into Lakewood?" Jenny looked stoked. She and Artie came from a bigger town, so the lack of things to do in suburban Lakewood was a bit of a letdown for her. "Yeah, let's go," Schmidt parroted. He was such a simp. I looked at Wyatt and he shrugged back. We didn't have any reason to not go, but it was a bit too spontaneous for us to say yes without getting our parents' permission first. When we glanced at Artie, he didn't seem too sure. "Artie?" Jenny elbowed Artie in the side. "You're serious about this?" He replied. "Aren't circuses supposed to be in the bigger part of a town? Like at the stadium or something?" "The woods are big enough to hold a circus. My dad says there's plenty of real estate opportunities on the other side of the lake," Schmidt said. "No, You dingus, shouldn't a circus be somewhere people actually live, and not out of the way in the middle of nowhere? Artie mumbled. Anyway, my mom said the woods are dangerous. What are you, chicken? Jenny giggled. Yeah, you chicken? Schmidt sneered, trying to look tough for Jenny. These woods aren't safe. When we moved here, our parents told us to never go into the woods alone. They said a lot of people have gone missing here. Artie said, pushing up his glasses. I understood where he was coming from. Out of all of us, he was the only one who had never gone into the woods before, and Artie was always the careful, paranoid type. And my parents told me the same thing even though I ignored their words and went anyway. Really? Just because you've never been in there before, you're gonna tell us that it's dangerous? Jenny challenged. High schoolers go to the lake all the time. Schmidt nodded. Do none of you realize this is exactly how people get kidnapped? Artie retorted, looking around. Am I the only one with any common sense here? Look, if you don't want to go, you don't have to. Jenny declared, ignoring Artie's hysterics. But I want to go. Who's in? Schmidt's hand went up immediately. Wyatt, Artie, and I hesitantly glanced at each other. But as soon as we saw Jenny's pleading smile, Wyatt and I reluctantly raised our hands. And as peer pressure dictated, Artie eventually agreed, as well under the pretense of keeping his sister safe and proving he was right. After a late lunch at the treehouse, we began wandering into the woods, using the crayon-drawn map as our guide. This was a time before having GPS installed cell phones was the norm, so we were mostly using the map, the markings on the trees, and our memory to get through the path. Up to a certain point, we were confident we knew where we were going, with Wyatt and Jenny leading the way. But that confidence didn't last too long. Where even are we? Artie complained. Relax. We come here all the time, Schmidt said, although he himself was trailing behind as well. Okay, but have you ever been to this big-ass lake? Artie retorted. Again, none of us had ever actually made it to the lake before. If it weren't for the town maps and older high school kids who found an easier path they could take by car, we would have written it off as an urban legend. It was just too far and out of the way. We just have to keep going north, Wyatt